most buyers want to take this business and run with it and make it their own. So that being said, leading up to a sale, your role in the business has to be reduced as much as it possibly can, because if you're taking on too many roles, it's going to make it harder for a buyer to jump in and do the same thing as you're doing.
In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And we are going to talk today about Jessica's article in Inc. What a great thing, right? So she had an article that was written by Minda Zeitlin,
Zetlin.
And it's called Selling Your Business. These 5 simple changes can boost your price by 50%. And some 80% of owners can sell their business at any price. So you can flip those odds in your favor. We've been talking about stuff like this for a long time, but I thought this article was great. Number one, that you are quoted and have this article in Inc. Congratulations. I think it's a great thing. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've talked a lot, Andy, that most businesses don't sell, right? And the statistics, we've both discussed this. We don't know how accurate they are, but you know, sometimes the IBBA will say only 20% of businesses are listed for sale, or there's other data out there. But we know that the majority are not selling, right? And I think from our experience, both of ours, but also holistically in the broker world, we know that there's some really simple things business owners can do to get their business ready for sale, right? And increase those odds in their favor.
Right. Exactly. With your book, Exit Factor, you talk about that whole process, and you do have a process for it. But this article kind of drilled down 5 things you could do right now, right?
Yep. Yeah. So let's just go in order. The first ones, if anyone is a longtime listener to the show, probably not going to be that shocking. I feel like we might be a broken record here, but it's cleaning up your financial documents. And honestly, I joke being about a broken record or stuff, but it's the single most important thing you can do to ensure a sale and ensure you get your selling price up. And when we're talking about financial documents, we're talking about your income statement, your balance sheet, but there's other documents too that need to be in order, your tax returns, your bank statements, kind of all need to work together. But I mean, Andy, I don't think we've understated this, but I don't know if we could overstate the importance enough of your financial documentation.
Yeah, it's really important. And every dollar that is somehow missed or hidden or unfindable by a reasonable due diligence, it's going to cost you $2, $3, $4, $5 on an exit, and it could be significant. And if you're brutalizing your financial documents and they're not in good order, no one's going to finance that transaction, and that will cost you cash at closing. And that could be significant. I use a little presentation saying that, seller financing is usually about 50%. So if you have an $800,000 deal, it'll cost you $400,000 to finance it. So at the closing table, you get $400,000, cost you $100,000 in fees. You're walking away with $300,000, right? At best. If you have good books and records, that same business is probably going to sell for more money because people can leverage into it. It has better books and records. So let's say another $200,000, it sells for $1 million. It costs the buyer 20% down, or even 10. You get $1 million at closing. It's still about $100,000 worth of cost, maybe a little bit more, and you're walking with 900 instead of 300. It's 3 times the money.
Yeah, it's crazy. And these situations happen every day to us, and it kills me every time. We just had one. And, a lot of times we talk about if you don't have clean books and records, it's going to limit the value of the business. Maybe it won't sell, but sometimes you just, as an owner, you don't know what you're making. So we just had a business that sold for about $600,000. And when the buyer was doing due diligence, he found there was about $50,000 of personal expenses that were run through the business that the owner didn't know about. Right. So never even figured it out. now has it under contract to sell. Had he kept better books or cleaner books or moved that out of the business into another entity or into your personal, which is what we recommend a lot of the times. And I think he sold it like a 3.5 times multiple, right? So 50,000 times 3.5 times, that's a significant chunk of change to walk away.
It's almost $200,000. I mean, it's, $175,000. They could have had, and that certainly will pay for a lot of things in your retirement. Also, there is no excuse for this anymore. So with the advent of computers and point of sale systems and QuickBooks, and even beyond QuickBooks, there are companies out there that will do this all for you. It's just incredible.
Yeah. So, so how do we fix this? Like if you're sitting in a situation, how do you fix this? QuickBooks is a great tool. There's tons of bookkeepers now. You can hire one as a freelancer. You can hire one in your business. There's even they're called apps, but there's people behind them, right? But there's apps that'll do your bookkeeping for you. But really it's figuring out what expenses are necessary in your business and what are not of business nature, right? So a lot of questions that we ask our clients is we'll say, hey, is this an expense that's necessary in the business or you would give as a benefit to a manager coming in, right? So if you're paying for your whole family's cell phone bill through your business, which is a common example that we see,
Sure.
Right? Just ask yourself, if you hired a manager to replace yourself, would you also pay for that manager's family cell phone bill? The answer is probably no, right? Unless you're a very compassionate, giving owner. But there's a lot of things like that. And those small things add up, right, over time. And that's how you get to these 50,000 chunks of change being missed in a business, or something you're not able to increase value from. So how you fix it is really hire it out and then go through your expenses on a quarterly basis as you're preparing for sale and ask, is this an expense that's necessary in the business? And sometimes too, is this still working? Because there's a lot of stuff we just keep going in our businesses that's not working anymore. A lot of subscriptions, monthly things that get caught up in our books and records we don't even need anymore.
Yeah, you should be going through your credit card statements as you think about selling and just trying to get rid of all those things that, that you're not using anymore. I know I have a few things on there that I could clean up as well. And, I did see like KPMG, big accounting firm, obviously, has come out with a small business QuickBooks-like app that is applied to your business. And then you get a counselor and people that will help you at KPMG. It's pretty sharp. I mean, there's going to be more stuff like that. So just
so much. But I think too, taking a step back from this, even if you're not like planning on selling today, like going through your expenses and cleaning them up, like you can boost your profit overnight by doing this. So it's kind of a no-brainer to put this in action on a quarterly basis, no matter what stage you are in your business.
Yeah, and we're talking about inflation now, and we're talking about recession. It's a good time to do this. And also what it's a good time to do is make the business less about you.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're going there, but I'll jump in. So, I mean, most buyers assume that the founders are going to be gone in a year or less than a year. Actually, it's a common misconception we get from a lot of sellers. They think they're going to have to stay on for years or multiple years. And that's true in some situations, but in most situations, that transition period's a year or less. Actually, if they use an SBA loan, the buyer uses an SBA loan, that's defined that it has to be a year or less. Most buyers want to take this business and run with it and make it their own. So that being said, leading up to a sale, your role in the business has to be reduced as much as it possibly can, because if you're taking on too many roles, it's going to make it harder for a buyer to jump in and do the same thing as you're doing.
Yeah, I just sat down with two sellers and I was talking to them, and one of them, we stopped the whole meeting and said, give us a list of what you do. And at one point they did say, and it says it in your article as well, it's like, well, I do the payroll. I'm like, why? Yeah. Why are you doing payroll at this point in the game? I mean, between Paychex, ADP, local payroll companies, it's cheap enough. You should not be doing that anymore in your business. And if you want another good book to read, or I don't know if we talked about good books yet, but the E-Myth, right?
Yep.
That's all about not making your business yourself. And the E-Myth is a great book just to read by Michael Gerber. He has a whole consulting side to his business that they've come up with, but it's about systematizing your business.
Yeah. And really, if you think about it, as entrepreneurs, we all want like two things, right? We want freedom and we want money. And that's why we created our businesses in the first place. But we get caught up in this, I feel like I can do it better than anybody else mentality sometimes. And that's when we start taking on too many roles. But I mean, E-Myth is a great method to start to figure out how and what roles to get out of. But one I mentioned in the article, and what I like too, is actually assign a value to each role that you're doing, right? So if you're paying, say you have to pay a bookkeeper $50 an hour and you've like 10 hours a month of work, right? And as the owner, when you're doing your highest generating activities, say it's sales or rainmaking, you're making like $500 an hour. Then why are you spending time doing a $50 an hour role? You're actually losing money when you're doing that time versus money trade. So that's something I mentioned in the article of like when you figure out what roles you have to get out of first, that's a good method. Another one is just like the stuff you hate doing, right? We talked to so many business owners too, Andy, a lot of it is bookkeeping and payroll is one of the first two things they come out of their mouth that they hate doing it. So why are we doing it still? I mean, it's just like technology is so crazy now. If you don't have a super complicated payroll structure, there's companies like we use Gusto where you can just automate your payroll, right? So you don't even have to go in and process it every 2 weeks.
Right. There's plenty of ways to get things off your desk. And you want to do that because when a buyer comes to look at your business, they have to imagine themselves being in your chair. And if you're filling up the soda machine every single week, that's not a good use of your time. Certainly not what a buyer wants to see. If you're still cleaning your own bathrooms, it's time to get rid of all that kind of stuff.
It's interesting too. We've talked on the show about like who buys businesses, right? And if we look at that individual buyer category where a lot of them are coming from corporate and they're trying to start or buy their own first business. If you think about back in like my corporate days were long ago and very short, but like I had one role in corporate, right? I was in charge of marketing online. That's it. Like I wasn't in charge of marketing and sales and janitorial and hiring and firing. And like, so you've got these buyers that aren't used to sitting in all these different seats. And it's really overwhelming if you think about it.
Yeah. And especially if you're in a business, we were just dealing with a business that was a pool leak contractor, right? So they sent out people to check for pool leaks, and they're the number one pool leak contractor here in Florida, which is obviously a pretty big business. And the owner doesn't jump in a pool anymore and check for leaks, but he has technicians. And not only that, he wasn't even the contractor that you need to be a contractor to do this pool leak work. And so the employee basically had to sign an employment contract with the new buyer, and we got that all done and we were able to. But the first thing the buyer did was when they started the business, they applied to become a contractor themselves because that. Yep.
Yeah.
So
you have the backup, but I mean, how many more buyers did that situation open up the business to versus if the owner was the contractor and the one doing the leaks, right?
Right. Which, talking about contracts.
Yes. So next in step 3 or of the 5 most important things you can do to increase the business values, we talk about reviewing your contracts. And we've touched on this a little bit on the show. And I think we've had some legal experts on how businesses are sold from a legal perspective. So most businesses are sold in what's called an asset sale. And what happens in those sales is that you have, company A that has all the assets and we transfer them to company B. Well, when that happens, you have to assign any contracts in your business. So this could be with your customers, your vendors, your employees. You have to assign that over to the buyer's new company. But in order for that to happen, you have to have what, Andy?
You have to have an assignment clause in your contracts, which we do. We have an assignment clause in our contracts. And it's just a healthy thing. I'm going through right now with a landlord, someone who's been in their space for over 30 years. The lease is due, and they want to put in an onerous new assignment clause into a very old lease, which back in the day, leases used to say, will not be withheld without unreasonable consent, or, will not be withheld without. Anyway,
yes.
So The new ones, of course, have all kinds of assignment fees, and the sellers stay on personally, and all kinds of things, personal guarantees post closing. So we're negotiating that now, and it's a mess. So
Yeah.
you want to know what your assignment clauses are. We've seen some ridiculous assignment clauses in some of the leases in shopping centers where the landlord gets to keep the profits from the increased value of your business.
Yeah.
We actually saw that once.
We've seen that a couple times. We've seen recently, we've seen an hourly billable rate, like $500 an hour for them working on the assignments, almost like a lawyer would. And I'll tell you, landlords' clocks run way faster than lawyers do for some reason.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it's just.
No, I was going to say, like, listen, and there's other contracts out there that we're dealing with out there in the world. There's medical insurance contracts where they're signed up with different insurance companies. There's contracts for supply, for dealerships. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we've run into that can get very, very sticky.
Yeah. And look, you can get around this, and there's another way to sell business called like a stock sale, which is not the preferential way to sell a small business. We won't talk about that today, but I think the important part is that these assignment clauses are really important, but they're very hard to negotiate at the finish line, right? This is work that has to be done ideally when you're signing the contracts in the first place, but if not, ahead of a sale. Because, we use the landlord examples because I think that's where we run into the most issues, but it can be even more impactful if you have the same thing with your customer contracts, right? If a buyer has to re-engage every single customer and a customer chooses not to move forward with your contract because you don't have that assignment clause, it can drop the value of your business dramatically.
Yeah, and you might want to get alternative contracts too. I mean, you might want to have two sources of supply. We've seen that before. You might want to balance your suppliers, even though you might have to pay a little more with some other supplier. Supply chain issues these days are killing deals or actually making them more expensive. And so you want to make sure that you have that flexibility because it's all about risk aversion with these buyers, right? They're lawyers and their accountants and their advisors and the banks are all looking for the downside of a business deal. And if you can minimize that downside by having assignable contracts or flexible contracts or all those kind of things, people are going to be more attracted to your business.
Yeah. And speaking about downsides and risk aversion, the next thing I recommend in the article is to create an owner's manual for your company. And this is key processes, tasks that you and your employees perform being documented ahead of a potential sale. And this includes your role as the owner too, right? Actually, that's probably the most important one because you're the one that is guaranteed to be leaving the company. But in terms of protecting the downside, a lot of buyers, they have two big concerns. They're concerned that the customers are going to leave and they're concerned the employees are going to leave. And one of the better solutions of, what if the employees leave is having a well-documented processes and systems, a manual, so you can replace that person very easily in the future.
Yeah, and cross-train people as well. We had a large sheet metal company that used to manufacture hurricane shutters. And it was a very, a business that, ran like clock, but it ran like clockwork because the owner was involved in everything, right? And so the first private equity group that came in, and this is a company that was making millions. First private equity group came in and eventually pulled out during due diligence and saying, you're everything to this business. We can't buy this business, because you're too much of a risk. So what he did was he learned his lesson and he went back and he wrote a manual for the whole business down to how many screws are included in every single order. Every single order had a pick list. Every single job had a project management software attached to it. And he did a great job of automating his business to the point where he used to go into the office once a week just to prove his point that he didn't need to be there. And the business sold for a lot more money.
It's super impactful. I mean, we call it owner absentee run businesses in the business brokerage industry, but it can really dramatically increase your value. We also, another great example, So restaurants are notorious for having high turnover. And we sold a restaurant a couple of years back for actually a higher than average multiple. But the reason was they had documented the roles of each person in the restaurant industry and had created such a great system for hiring, onboarding, and training that they could fill a role trained, ready to go within less than a week. And that was extremely attractive to buyers. And they got a higher multiple and higher value of the business just because of that piece in an industry where you're going to have turnover. Like it's inevitable, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's a big one. I mean, you really want to make sure that the buyers want to buy something that can be easily bought. And the SBA used to be sticklers. They used to, the banks used to be real sticklers for management experience in criteria for a buyer. And it was so funny. We just had a new bank come in yesterday, and somebody asked the question, how do you feel about management experience? And they said, as long as they were really loose with it, as long as the buyer has some good experience in business, whether, somehow, and the owners have good documentation on how to run that business. And that's why the SBA and businesses love franchises too, because they have a manual, they have a success guide, as we do here at Transworld. So that's what you really kind of want to do for your business. So it's a great point. And the last point is, you're not going to be able to sell your business if you have a horrible reputation, especially online.
Yeah. Unfortunately, look, this is the world we live in today. Everything is rated and reviewed online. And this goes for offline too. I think online is just much more in your face, and it's much easier for buyers to get access to. So leading up to a sale, you have to clean up your online reputation. And that doesn't mean necessarily, like, I know there's a lot of companies out there, some are good, some are bad, some are ugly, that will clean up your online reviews, get you, we'll call them less than real positive reviews. But there's a lot of things that you can do to tackle your online reputation. First, you can go out to the customers that have loved you, your partners that have loved working with you, and get some positive reviews to bury some of those negative ones. The other thing I love, and this is actually a tip, Andy, I don't know if you remember, this was at the United Franchise Group conference back in like 2018 or 19. And there was a speaker that said, if you respond in a compassionate, respectful way to a negative review, 1/3 of the time they'll leave it, whatever, but you've responded to it in a respectful way. 1/3 of the time they'll take it down. And the other third of the time, they'll actually change it to a positive review. So if you're responding to these negative reviews in a nice, respectful way, suggesting to have the conversation offline and apologizing for their experience, 2/3 of the time, it's actually going to work out in your favor. So, being proactive about this and going back if you can, but also starting from today, listening to this episode, really controlling what your reputation is online, it is just going to boost the value of the business. It's going to boost a number of buyers that are interested in it once they've signed their NDA and find out what the business is.
Yeah, it works for me too. I mean, listen, I was just looking at Amazon at a product, and it had like a 4-point something review, and I was just looking through the bad reviews, and I thought it was great that when they did have a bad review, they responded underneath it. And it said, well, at least the company's trying. And these, listen, you're always going to have a cadre of people that I call the cave people, the citizens against virtually everything, right? So they are just going to complain no matter what happens, right? They don't like the food, they don't like the service, they didn't like this, they didn't like the price. So as long as you respond, you show that, hey, listen, this is a complainer. And then you have, again, your first point of burying the bad ones is good. I mean, you have to get some people to give you good reviews. So.
Yeah. And look, the people that love working with you will be more than happy to do this for you. You just have to make an effort and make that outreach and ask for the reviews. Explain you're a small business, that, your business depends on reputation online and referrals from great customers like them. We find most of our customers are happy to do that for us.
Yeah. I mean, these are all great things to do when you're thinking about selling and you're getting ready to sell. So, I mean, I know we've been thinking about more content like this, where we're going to talk about like how to make your business better on top of, because, I just realized I've been doing this for 27 years. Time flies, right? And I was talking to some business owners this morning. I was at our execs and we were presenting Transworld, and so many people are coming up to us. And I've been with this group for over 15 years, and some of them are retiring now. And a lot of them came up to me talking about, wanting to retire. And of course, we always give them tips like this, but we want to help them get ready to retire. And we want to help you out there in the world be more successful while you're in your business.
Yeah. And look, a lot of these things that you implement in your business that we're going to talk about, we've got this episode, we've got a follow-up coming up on it too, it's not going to just make the business better in the future for sale, but it's going to make it more efficient and more profitable for you in the short term, right? So, like I said, most entrepreneurs want money and freedom, right? So if you can get some of that stuff now for yourself and not have to wait until you sell your business, you might as well take advantage of it. But the key to all this, Andy, that we were talking about when we were kind of in our green room before this, is we can give you all the advice in the world. We can give you all the success and non-success stories, but there's one key thing that actually has to happen in order to implement the change.
Yeah, you got to go out there and do it. You got to do the work. You got to show up, get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves, and implement these things. And so to do that, sometimes you need a good coach. And so we're going to be talking to some coaches as well.
Yeah. So we've got a great interview coming up for this episode. Also, like I said, we've got a follow-on episode of part 2 of this one, where we're going to bring on some coaches and partners that actually jump in and help do that work, because we know that you're super busy as business owners. So sometimes that's of a benefit too. And then we also, like always, have some great deals of the week, listings of the week for you to check out.
So let's get to it.
Transworld Business Advisors is the world's largest business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions firm, with over 500 brokers in nearly 200 offices worldwide. Transworld's team handles thousands of business sales every year. To be connected with a qualified business broker or learn more about the buying and selling process, visit tworld.com/the deal board or call 888-719-9098.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And we are talking about coaching. We're talking about making your business more valuable. Jessica and I were talking on the intro and the intro to the last one about CEOs and how they can make their business more valuable. And Jessica and I were talking about it, and we were just saying, hey, most CEOs get stuck. And we're like, how do we get them unstuck? And I said, I know how we get them unstuck. There are some great business coaches out there in the world, and none better than who's sitting with me right now, John Arnold, my dear friend and amazing business coach. So John, welcome to the show.
Andy, thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
So John, we've talked many times offline. I know that, you've done coaching for some of my CEO friends, and you've even coached me on several of my personal things that have happened in my life. And John, what are you seeing out there in general? We were talking a little bit beforehand, and you see a lot of stressors out there in the world.
Yeah, Andy, there's probably more stress inside companies and organizations that I've seen in a very long period of time. You had the pandemic. That was the initial kickoff to the stress that's been happening. You've got people resigning, the Great Resignation. There's a title for all of this. And at the same time, business leaders and business owners are experiencing stress like they've never experienced before. And most of that comes from, how do you plan for the next unexpected business disruption, which is a question that I asked leaders at the end of last year. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, yeah. How are you planning for the next unplanned business disruption? And so whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're running a big company or a small company, you're experiencing stress like you've never experienced before, whether it's the battle for talent, people leaving, whether, this competition for talent is really amazing. And it has no geographic boundaries because you can work remotely from anywhere. And the other thing that I see business leaders struggling with is they want someone to tell them the truth. They want someone to be a confidential sounding board. And I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I've positioned myself to be that confidential sounding board who's also not afraid to ask the hard questions. And it's not the typical, what keeps you up at night? It's the question where the business leader is being challenged to solve a particular problem. And I like to use the phrase, okay, what's the risk and impact to the business? And they'll go, what does that mean? And I'll say, well, if you make this decision, what's the risk and impact to the business? And if you go down this path, what's the risk and impact to the business? Especially if it involves people, because once it involves people, it's likely to become an emotional decision, which is always a bad decision. So I like to use the phrase, what's the risk and impact to the business? Because that gives the business leader or the business owner the opportunity to step back and think about, what is the risk and impact to the business based on the decision that I have to make?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, again, we were talking about, and what led up to this conversation was that we're talking about increasing the value of your business. And I always feel like we're giving this great advice out there in the world. And a lot of times people don't take it. They're just like, they have inaction. They can't get they have paralysis by analysis, I always say. So how do you help that? How do you break that log jam? I mean, like you said, they have all these stressors. A lot of times they know what they need to do, but they're not willing to do it. So how do you kind of go in there and kind of help them?
Great question. It's been my experience over the years, Andy, that business leaders, primarily business owners, really struggle letting go. Letting go for them is one of the most painful things, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you own a small business, because you built that business around you, or that business is you. And letting go, really? You want me to let go? I created this. Yeah, that's great. And the longer you hold on to it, the faster you go down with the ship. That's just reality. And even with some of the corporate leaders I work with, they'll come up with a list of, these are my goals. That's great. How good at you are letting go? Oh, don't ask me to do that. This is really important to me. Great. What's the risk and impact to the business if you continue to hold on to that? So if you're an entrepreneur or you're thinking about selling your business, which is your expertise, getting someone to let go is really important. And I'm sure you've experienced this, Andy. Sometimes it's less about the money and it's more about, how do I let go of what I've created? And some of that's ego, and you deal with that. But that's really, when I'm coaching a leader and they have this list of goals, one of the things I ask them is, what are you worried about letting go? What's the thing that you need to let go of and you can't? So we'll work through that, because there's a risk and impact to the business if they don't find a way to let go.
And that's interesting. That's so true. And of course, you got my mind spinning of what things I should be letting go of, and we talk about that a lot out there in the world, and of things that I should be letting go of. And so, and it's certainly obviously letting go. And I think I've done a pretty good job of building my organization and being able to delegate. So I think, I've seen you work with some very strong individuals. I won't mention their occupations because that might give away who you've worked with in the past, but I know you've worked with some very focused, very disciplined, very strong entrepreneurs. And, I've seen you make a huge impact in their lives. So why don't you talk a little bit about how do you break out of that mold of letting go?
Great question. I think the one thing I really pride myself on is telling people the truth. And sometimes the truth makes us really uncomfortable. Forget the phrase, the truth hurts. Of course it hurts. But it's really important sometimes for entrepreneurs especially to get uncomfortable. And they just don't like being uncomfortable. They want to be in control. You see this all the time with the business owners that you're dealing with, whether it's a buyer or a seller. So when I'm working with a leader, part of my work with them is to get them comfortable being uncomfortable. I had a chemistry call with the CEO a couple of weeks ago who, after I asked him a couple of questions, he goes, man, you really ask hard questions. I said, I do. I'm also compassionate because I coach the whole person. And they'll go, what does that mean? I want to know how someone's doing physically, mentally, and spiritually, because I work with the whole person. It's not just on 2 or 3 goals. I want to understand what makes that person tick. Are they taking care of themselves? If they're not, what's in the way? What are they willing to let go of? so that they can bring themselves back to that true north, whatever phrase you want to use. So, my style is very direct, but people hire me to deliver results, but it's not without compassion.
And that's interesting. And I have worked with you in the past, and I know, being friends with you, that you do take very good care of yourself, and you're in shape, and you done things like martial arts and things like that. And perhaps to your detriment, every once in a while I see you with a black eye or something. But so is that part of it? Is that part of coaching the whole person, of kind of getting their lives straight first?
Absolutely. It comes from the very beginning, from the very first call, because I always ask the leader, especially if we're doing a chemistry call, tell me about you personally. I'd like to get to know everything you're open to telling me. And they might tell me about a family or a partner or something. Then they'll ask me why. And I said, because if there's an aspect of your personal life that's out of balance, it's going to show up at work. If I'm working with a leader who says, I really need to lose 20 pounds. Okay, go lose 20 pounds. Lose a pound a week until it takes you 20 weeks. Don't try to do it in a week. But it's important for me to understand how they show up. A few weeks ago, I had a leader, and I could tell as soon as we got on the call that something was going on. And he shared something very personal with me and said, I don't think we'll do the work today. Can we postpone it? He shared what was going on, and I let go. It would have served no purpose for us to painfully go through a coaching call if, in fact, he didn't deal with the situation he had to deal with that was personal. So it's important for me to make that connection. And I'll tell you, I do a really good job of connecting with people. I love people. But if I can't make that connection with the leader early on, the work's not going to be fulfilling for either one of us. So that's what I mean about coaching the whole person. And it's not about politics or religion. It's mostly family, hobbies, how do they take care of themselves? Because I'll know as we're working together what's kind of off for them based on something else that's going on in their lives.
Right. And so in coaching beyond the whole person, now you have to kind of dive into their organizations. So how do you make them more effective or help them move the needle in their own organizations? And not that we're giving away secrets here,
Sure,
but,
sure.
A lot of time we're just I'm trying to understand, what stops a leader from doing what they need to do?
Great question. Sometimes what stops them is their own people, meaning, a leader has built a great executive team. He or she has done a masterful job at building a great team. And, guess what? In order to take that company to the next level, they might have to make the difficult decision of asking someone to step down from that senior leadership team or executive team because, they got them to this level, but they're not able to take them to the next level. So that means they're going to have to have a really difficult conversation. And I get away from, people talk about conflict. Oh, I don't want to talk to Andy because I know it's going to be a conflict. Well, guess what? If you think it's going to be a conflict, it will be a conflict because that's how you prepare. It's like preparing for battle. But if you prepare to have a difficult conversation that's going to be in the best interest of both parties, then that's how you prepare. So if I'm working with a leader who wants to really take his team to the next level and really get them to be high performing, let's talk about that. Hey, Andy, I want to create a high performing team. Great. What does that mean? Who do you invite to play? What are you looking for them to do? What's going to be the impact on your company if, in fact, you do have a high performing team? Or, you have a leader who really wants to flex up his or her executive presence. They want to take their own game to the next level. Or they might be looking to really create a strong succession plan, and they've got two potential candidates. How do I make that decision? Well, let's create a plan together and see who rises to the top.
Right.
And with the pandemic, you've got companies all over the place who had to reinvent their strategic plan, or maybe take their vision that they had in 2019 and reinvent that vision for 2020, 2021, and 2022. Right now you've got people that are planning for 2023 and 2024, but the vision they put in place prior to that no longer serves the company. So sometimes vision planning and doing vision work is difficult because they feel they need to do it by themselves. And I provide a space where we can do that together.
It's a very comforting thing. I always say being an entrepreneur is a lonely thing, right? You can't necessarily go home and unload to your spouse or people at home, your family, because you don't want to scare them if there's things going wrong. And you certainly can unload to your employees sometimes so it's kind of a lonely thing. So having a coach, I would imagine, is very cathartic, at least and I've watched you coach a lot of different coaches, thinking one in particular, Melissa, who is a dear friend of ours. And so there's different, do you have to adapt your coaching style to the person or more the organization, right? Is it more like, so Melissa was in charge of junior achievement and she was in, were you more worried about how to coach her for the organization or more worried about how to coach Melissa for Melissa?
That's a great question. So for me, it's about coaching the person first.
Right.
I really want to work with that person. I want to find out what their demons are, where they struggle, what are the things they won't tell anybody else. And get that leader to take his or her game to the next level so that they can bring the rest of the organization along with them. So for me, it's always about the person. And sure, there are 2 or 3 really important goals, building a high-performing team, creating strong executive presence, work on their communication skills. That's great. So as a result of doing that work, what do you expect the organization to do? So for me, in my style, it's always about working with the leader first, so I can get them to build a solid foundation to take their leadership game to the next level, so they can bring their teams and organization along with them. And it's no different than an entrepreneur. I mean, I worked with an entrepreneur a couple of years back, and after spending a day in the office with his team, he said, "What do you see the problem to be?" I go, "Well, you're the problem." He's like, "What?" And I go, "Yeah, you're in the way."
Right.
You got to get out of the way so people can grow, so people can make mistakes, so people can fail. It's not going to cost you money.
Right.
And so oftentimes, I think entrepreneurs, it's been my experience, they struggle with that, when do I, yes, let go, but when do I get out of the way so that other people can grow, flourish, fail, make mistakes?
It's true. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, oftentimes, and if we're talking about increasing the value of your business, you have to do exactly that. You have to let your team, the buyer is going to want to be able to jump into your seat and run the company. And if you're the chief cook, bottle washer, visionary, worker, mastermind of this whole thing, that's very scary to a buyer. But if you're a guy who's been, someone who's been coached, whose team is in control, whose team is doing the heavy lifting, whose team is performing at a higher level, that's a much more valuable business to a buyer.
Yeah, the funny thing about being an entrepreneur for me is I think we all have an inner entrepreneur. Many of us had paper routes, many of us cut grass, many of us shoveled snow, depending upon where we were like, this is my money. This is my business. Then you realize in order to take that business to the next level, that's pretty scary. So right. we went out and got jobs and started careers. So being an entrepreneur, I think we all growing up had a little bit of that. I mean, I've been on my own now for 22 years, but I've been fortunate enough to align myself with other leadership organizations. So I have partnerships in place, but it can be scary, and going back to that letting go thing, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to get uncomfortable so that they can get comfortable and make the right business decision for them, their business, and their employees.
It's a very, very, very wise words. Kind of wrapping this up into what's the best way to work with you? What's your preferred method? Do you like to, I know you've traveled all over the world, helping people. So there's no boundaries to this, right?
No boundaries at all. In fact, I'm working with a CEO in Germany as we speak. So yes, no boundaries. There are no boundaries to this business. The only boundaries that come up are the ones that leaders put in front of them.
Right. And I know you're a busy guy, but if somebody wanted to talk to you and get more information, what's the best way to get in touch with you, John?
Great. Thanks, Andy. Well, my email address is John, John, at johnsarnold.com. So John at JOHNSARNOLD.com. My cell phone is 954-294-7053. And my office line is 954-796-6001. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of having the curiosity or courage to pick up the phone or send me a note.
Yeah. And I will tell everybody who's listening, again, I've run into a lot of coaches in my life and none better than John. John is an amazing coach. He asks you, like he said, very tough questions, but again, with compassion, with an eye on, kind of doing the right thing for all the parties. And again, John, thank you for all the coaching that you've done pro bono for some of our leading nonprofits here in South Florida. You've done a great job with them as well. So thank you for all of that. Any parting advice for people out there? Like you said, we're just kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, right?
Yeah, it's how are you planning for the next unexpected, unscheduled business disruption? So, if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or an executive, pick up the phone and call a coach. I mean, they can be great resources. Everything you talk to them about is confidential. And, quite often you're going to find that confidential space to be comfortable and uncomfortable. So, Andy, I thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I really do. I appreciate that. And, you're the best.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. And everyone, take John's advice. You either give John a call or give someone else a call. It's an invaluable service. And if you want to take your company to the next level, you usually need some help and guidance. And John can certainly do that for you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Andy.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for Listing of the Week.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And it is Listing of the Week. And we have a great listing. We have Marc Keane from Transworld Business Advisors of Boston. And very interesting, he's going to talk about an industry that we talk a lot about in the South, but this one has dual purposes up here in the North. So, Marc, why don't you tell us about it?
Thanks very much, Andy. So we have a pretty good size north of Boston commercial landscaping company. And they also do snow plowing, snow removal. This particular company has been in business for about 7 years. We're looking for a list price on this property of $985,000. The seller's discretionary earnings consistently around $350,000 per year. And I think we might even have a buyer at this point. So
yeah, it sounds like a great deal. And it's funny because I did a speech at the Lawns. I forget what the Lawn's last name is. The Lawn Doctor, right. Lawn Doctor franchise. And a lot of those guys make more money from snow plowing than they do landscaping.
that's actually right, Andy. So their split of business is 60-40, 60% with the snow removal. That was based off last year's numbers, and 40% with the commercial upkeep of properties.
All right. Well, it sounds like a great deal. So do you have good books and records?
Yes, everything looks pretty good. We'll find out today. We have both the buyer and seller coming into our Transworld office this afternoon.
Excellent. So hopefully we get a deal done. But if you want to get that deal before it sells, Marc, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can just contact me directly, or actually email's probably the best way, mkeane@tworld.com.
All right. We'll drop that in the show notes. Marc, thanks for coming aboard today.
All right, thanks very much, Andy.
Hey, Andy, do you know what time it is? It's time for our deal of the week.
Deal of the week.
Sold.
Hey, welcome back. And it is Deal of the Week. And I have the one and only Aaron Fox with me from Transworld Business Advisors of Boston. And I am here in Boston. I'm having a great time. Aaron, welcome to the show. And you just got what are the deals that we do a lot of? You just got a salon done.
Yeah. No, thanks, Andy, for having me. I always love talking about these. You know, at Transworld, we have a lot of fun. A lot of times we're doing deals that it's just, people who love what they do and want to do more. And so we just worked with a group of three stylists to buy the salon that they were working in from the retiring owner. And it was a fantastic deal. It was, you went into it, the cash flow was there. The owner was, very profitable. They were doing over $1 million in revenue a year. So that was great. So we had a nice base to start with, but they hadn't really looked into this. So we had, they weren't fully prepared for it because no one knows when retirement's going to happen except the owner. So we worked with them. We said, let's develop a plan. Let's get this together. And we introduced them to lenders, helped them with their business plan right through the process. And at the end, we have 3 very excited owners now of the salon that's going to carry it for the next 25 years.
So it sounds like a great deal. Again, great deals for great people. So it was financed through the SBA?
It was full SBA financing with the working capital line on top of it.
Wow. And how much did it sell for?
I ended up selling for $250,000.
$250,000, and it was making over $100,000, right?
Yeah.
So just about 2x multiple.
Yep, just about.
Yeah, and the owner's retiring, and the stylist bought it. So sounds like a great deal. If somebody wants to sell more businesses like that, and I know that you do a lot of other businesses, but what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Sure. You can always reach us on email, aaron@tworld.com, or call us direct at 781-773-8922.
Good deal. Great job.
Thanks.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for listing of the week.
Hey, we're back, and it is listing of the week, and I have Marc Lazarus from my old stomping grounds in New Jersey. And what else are we here to talk about other than what?
Pizza.
Pizza. It's North Jersey. So, Marc, tell us about this great pizza place.
There's so many pizzerias around, and they're all good pizza in North Jersey. So I have one it's on the high end for pizzeria. It's doing pizza people talking weekly income. It's 60,000 a week is the volume, which is a little over 3 million a year. And they're dropping about $1 million to the bottom line. It's a 4,400 square feet. It's split into 2. It's got a pizza side and it's got a dining side. And the dining side's been closed since COVID. So somebody who comes in can open up the dining side. Also, they did a huge lunch business, which had dropped off due to COVID, and that hasn't really come back yet. And they're still doing better numbers than they did pre-COVID. So we're asking for $2 million, and this business can be SBA financed. So it's something that has upside potential, and it really hums. It's 35 years old. 2 brothers own it, and they're ready to sell off in the sunset.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing deal. $1 million bottom line, you could finance that over 10 years. So it sounds like you'd have some serious cash flow.
Exactly. It's amazing for pizzeria.
Excellent. So what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Email ML, my initials, at tworld.com, and my phone is 201-370-9600.
All right, Marc, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends on social media. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting app. If you have questions, would like to appear, or have suggestions for topics for the show, get in contact with us through our website, thedealboardpodcast.com.